Hello and welcome to At the 55, your home for OUA football. Me and Tom are back on the mics to break down the OUA semifinals and do a little C to C peek around the other conferences and how their playoffs are going, where we now have our matchup, a rematch from last year for this year's Yates Cup Championship. We'll talk about all that. We'll do our players of the week. As I said, we'll do a little C to C, but not before I ask Tom, how the heck you doing, my friend?
I'm always doing well, my man, especially after such an amazing experience that we had at Waterloo with the folks at Laurier. Shout out once again to Dan Polishchuk, Coach Michael Falls, Coach Todd Galloway, and everybody else who was in there who helped us get set up and get that done, because what an awesome atmosphere. And you can't say thank you to Laurier without thanking the parents group,
Yeah.
of which people came up and they gave us cannolis, they gave us chilies, sandwiches. They wanted to make sure that we got a little something from the tailgate, even though we were told we were about 150 feet away from a cold beer in some of those tailgates as well. But an outstanding atmosphere. Thank you, Laurier, for doing all of that for us. And little sneak preview right now. We'll be back next week.
It's a beautiful thing and can't wait for that one. Still going to be doing the show as we were talking about live. It'll be a beautiful day. Hopefully the weather holds up because, the equipment doesn't like the cold like, the football atmosphere does. We're going to break down all the games that we saw across esports as well. But of course, we start with players of the week, and we're going to go to Wilfrid Laurier because, I mean, when big number 13 takes the field, it's almost certain that he's going to pick up or be a surefire candidate for player of the week. Tom, tell the folks what Mr. Elgersma did on this day.
I mean, you look at a guy like Taylor Elgersma, and let's say he's got a couple issues, with some penalties and things of that nature, like we saw, a couple of objectionable conducts, which we know that our good friend Murray Drinkwater and Kevin Baird and all of the refs that are out there are listening to this. So please, if you hear this, reach out and educate us. I'm under the impression that 2 objectionable conducts and you're kicked out of the game, and Mr. Elgersma got him back to back in a lot of things. So Zach and I were looking around like, oh my God, it's 13 off. But regardless of that, he is our player of the week, our offensive player of the week. 24 for 34, 348 yards, 3 touchdowns, along with 20 yards on the ground as well. The last one, this long of 9, to secure the final first down that they needed to end the game. So when you look at this dude, especially what he means to this team and this program, he is just the quintessential leader, even if he maybe runs his mouth a little too much.
And that final run, of course, called by our guy, Todd Stones Galloway. And you talk about the leadership piece. And again, shout out to everyone at Laurier for not only letting us do the show there, for feeding us, but they let us come into the locker room for the pregame, which we'll have some video coming out for. Because again, shout out to our guys with Royal Media and Manny and Alex being there, capturing every moment from the preview show all the way through the game and the pregame hype up. Oh yeah, it's a wild scene in there. Again, shout out to Elgersma. As the one thing I'll say, and again to any of the referees tuning in, correct both of us, correct me. I think though, even though on the overhead speaker, and obviously we'll get into the breakdown of it, they said objectionable conduct number 13 Taylor Elgersma. For the second one, I think I remember something in the rules that if it comes from the bench, it is put on the head coach. Obviously, they did say 13, which that's pretty obvious that they would be giving the penalty to Taylor. I think generally if it's coming from someone beaking on the bench, the whole idea is like, well, the ref's not going to turn around and be like, hey, who said that? It's like, all right, coach, your bench is out of order, objectionable conduct on you. So a bit of confusion again to anyone listening who knows the rules a little better than us. Please correct us on that. Though, Tom, we're not straying all that far. We are going to go to our other game for the defensive player of the week, but let's linger here a little bit to do a quick shout out. Another young man who was gracious enough to actually do a little interview with us after the game. You know the name, even though I think I've been getting it wrong for a year and change. He's been in the OUA reigning rookie of the year and just doing such great things in the middle for this defense. Again, our shout out because there's some other stellar performances we want to go to, but just to quickly highlight what Ethan Gregorczyk was doing. And obviously we know at middle linebacker, he's usually racking up the stat sheet with tackles. He comes away with an interception where he gets 41 yards on the interception, but also 3 breakups on top of that. 1 or 2 of those, Hey, it's the classic joke. Like that's why you play defense. At least one of those, you'd think, man, that was almost another interception. But just that we're seeing this aspect from his game, where when he starts next to Ife Onyemenenum at that will position in his rookie year and really just fill the gap, just play hard nosed defense and just maybe single read. The fact that he's now able to drop into coverage and get his hands in the passing lanes is really a beautiful step forward to see with this young man. However, we're going to head over to London, Ontario, Tom, for the true defensive player of the week shout out we want to give out.
Yes, absolutely. And the final thing that I'll say about Mr. Gorsuch, get another one of those interceptions, and you are our player of the week. So get some sure hands on you, buddy boy. But he didn't, so he's not. Our defensive player of the week goes to number 31, Max Nixon, linebacker for the Western Mustangs. 4.5 tackles, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss, and a fumble recovery. When this man is getting things going and he's really running all around the field like he normally does, he is a problem for opposing offenses. What that Western defense is doing right now, and we'll get into it obviously later on in the pod, is nothing short of amazing. And they do it every year when they get into the playoffs.
It's outstanding. And you know what? Honestly, we'll get back into some of the other great performances because your guy in Justin Pace, like he's been doing all year, had a hell of a day. And when we just think about the top linebackers in the league, my goodness, were we spoiled on this weekend, and some other guys that we will talk about as well. We're going to stick in the Forest City, London, Ontario, for the special teams player of the week. And I'm going to tell you a little story about this young man and Brian Garrity, because on this day, he goes 3 for 3 on his field goals and on his extra points, racking up 12 points and 12 points in a game, course, where Western ends up winning by 11. So you can just, in a very simplified version of playing around with the numbers, say without his performances on the day, they don't pick up this win. Again, a very simplistic argument. I'm not actually going to lean into that. But obviously, this time of year, it becomes so much more crucial, not just with the fact that you're in against the best of the best and that it's high leverage moments every time that kicker steps onto the field, but you're also dealing with the factor of the weather. And I know that Mr. October is a name that's been given to one Reggie Jackson of New York Yankees fame. I'm certain to plenty of other people as well. And I don't know if a Mr. November's been given out, but the great thing with OUA playoffs is we kind of bridge the gap. So I'm going to go ahead and call Mr. Garrity, Mr. Brian Garrity, Mr. Knocktober, because what he's done his whole career, being the kicker, the place kicker for the Western Mustangs in this decade, starting that shortened season in 2021, is nothing but spectacular, not including the U Sports playoffs, working backwards from this game they had this past weekend, the semifinal appearances. First set of numbers will be field goals. Second is extra points. 3 for 3, 3 for 3. Game before, 3 for 3, 5 for 5. Game before, 6 for 6, 1 for 1. Game before, 3 for 3, 5 for 5. Game before, 1 for 1, 5 for 6. Make note of that. Game before that, 3 for 3, 5 for 5. Game before that, 2 for 2, 3 for 3. Game before that, 4 for 4, 3 for 3. Game before that, 2 for 2, 6 for 6. Racking up to a total in his OUA football playoff career, not including U Sports playoffs, but we know those Western Mustangs have played in those a lot. On his field goals, he's 26 for 26. And his extra points, he is 34 for 35, being the field goal kicker for the Western Mustangs since their Vanier Cup year in 2021. Brian Garrity, you are Mr. Knocktober. Great job by you.
Oh my, Brian Garrity, Mr. Automatic, Mr. Knocktober. Wow. Outstanding job by you as well to go back and to do all that research to get into this. But oh my god, you and I both know that Brian Garrity is good. I didn't realize he was that good, especially, man, October, November. That's when some of these games are the most stressful. To be ice in his veins. Wow, Brian Garrity, what a guy.
It's incredible. And of course, like, and what really brought to mind was like, oh, right, this was the Yates Cup MVP from a year ago. And that was the game where he's 6 for 6, 1 for 1. It's disgusting. Brian Garrity, and is also a member of the Faculty of Education at Western University. So to shout out to you for all the great things you're doing, both in your community, joining the force of teachers. Shout out to those folks, and just what you're doing week after week. Let's get into the action. And though both these games happened at the same time, based on the schedule, we're going to stay in London, Ontario, where the Western Mustangs. Oh, are we going to move?
Flip. We're not doing C2C, my man.
Oh, we're jumping to C2C. My apologies, Tom. I misread our schedule. Tom, C2C, take it away.
Hey, we're an OUA football podcast first and foremost here. We got to save the best for last. Let's
Amen,
give a
brother.
let's give a little shout out to everybody else across the leagues here. So, starting things off, St. Mary's at St. FX, our first incorrect game. For those of you who watched our YouTube live, we called
Yes.
all of these games and we made our picks. We did go 5 for 3, but whoo, some of these upsets were outstanding. First
Tom,
one being
Tom, just to contextualize that 5 for 3 includes our OUA picks, where we, have a little more comfortability in the picks. If you just take our, well, it's a whole different kettle of fish in our U Sports picks. But anyways, my apologies.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. In this one, St. Mary's 21, St. FX 17. The first time since 2021, since 2019, that they were not in the Loney Bowl championship at all. An unbelievable performance by the St. Mary's team. Alan Young, quarterback for the St. Mary's Huskies, 20 for 29, 279 yards and 2 touchdowns. Reese Wyke, leading rusher, 15 attempts for 74 yards. And Bryson Mayo, 3 catches, 92 yards, and a touchdown. The offense was really doing their thing with St. Mary's, but you
Yeah.
have to look at our guy. I had the extreme pleasure of being able to interview him and get to know him a little bit. Silas Fagnon, 25 for 36, 376 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He does his thing. The big factor in this one, in my opinion, is the running game. We talked about Malcolm Busey and his contributions to the program and how well he was able to run the ball and do his thing. Caleb Fogarty was that guy for St. FX and really doing his thing. In this game, 10 attempts for 45 yards and a long of 12. So really, it's 9 attempts for 33. So that's really where a lot of this comes into play here. When you look at the play of St. FX and the domination that they've had year after year after year with Coach Waterman, this is a huge testament to St. Mary's and Steve Samara, who is now the head coach back at SMU. Outstanding job by those Huskies, and congratulations on making it into the Loney Bowl.
Well, and Tom, I mean, this is a St. Mary's defense that's been one of the top ranked across U Sports. And like, put your East Coast bias aside, because as you mentioned, Silas Fagnon has proven himself at the highest level. So
Mhm.
we know that that's St. FX, and you add in what Gary Waterman's been doing, and obviously losing Malcolm in the backfield's huge. But as you highlighted it, they were able to keep that rushing game afloat. And this St. Mary's defense limiting St. FX off of their average of 30 points that they're putting up a game. And not just that, but as we saw, and again, it's tough to play just by the numbers. And I don't want to add too much into it, but forcing 3 fumbles, all of which St. Mary's recovered, and just being able to slow down that powerful offense under Fagnon. Just outstanding job by them. And just, yeah, I love the Coach Samara shout out, because of course it brings it back to the OUA. Tom, proceed.
It's always back to the OUA in some way, shape, or form. The next game that we go out to, this one was a little bit more predictable, and what we had called here, Bishops taking out Acadia by the score of 59-0. Now, we had seen a much more competitive game against Bishops and Acadia in the second game. The first game, for those of you who tuned in or who haven't seen it, Bishops won that one 70-7. The second game, much closer, 28-18. And this one, once again, Bishops really coming alive and doing their thing. Justin Curion, I believe that's how I'm trying my best to pronounce it, has been playing outstanding. He is most definitely going to win the AUS Player of the Year. In this game, 21 for 30, 364 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. He's playing some outstanding football. Olivier Burnett, 5 catches, 127 yards, 2 touchdowns. Brian Griffiths, 4 catches for 80 yards. I mean, what the Bishop squad is doing right now has been nothing short of amazing. Forget all your East Coast biases, forget anything along those lines. These guys are playing some outstanding football. And exactly like you said, with how well we've seen St. FX play in those national semifinal games, especially in the last 2 years, sure, maybe the fourth quarter, other teams are starting to pull away, but they're in those games right up to it. To see Bishops dominate these teams out east and really be able to establish themselves, I think this team is the real deal. And I certainly don't think whichever OUA team goes out and travels to potentially to Bishops, as long as they take care of business against St. Mary's, that's not just going to be here's a free ticket to the Vanier Cup. This is a real team. They are legit, and that defense is no joke either.
Most certainly. And we obviously have a lot of folks who either play in the RSEQ, pardon me, in CJEP, or children who play in CJEP or now in the OUA, much like our shout out to the referees. Talk to us about this guy, Quiron. Is he legit, the real deal? Again, when we look at what we've seen Silas do year in, year out, some of the other top performers, we know that when they get into those East-West games, it sticks. And even to those semifinals, obviously Santa Fe was given, some teams like Saskatchewan in some semifinal games, a couple scares over the last couple years in this decade. The one thing, again, to our folks out tuning in from Quebec, noticing on this Bishop's defense, which has again been so stellar, up there with the likes of what Laval's been doing. One Sheriff Kamara, and I'm wondering, because we know we have Soliman Kamara in Ottawa, obviously Ottawa having a lot of players that come out of Quebec. Hey, I wonder, do we have a connection there through the Kamaras? But great job on this one. Tom, take us to the RSEQ.
Starting things off, this was another couple of games that we called correctly, and we're never really in doubt here. The first one, we go to Laval taking out Concordia by the score of 41-18. We talked about it on the live show once again. Arnaud Desjardins has always been fantastic. We obviously had all of our OUA fans, at least, saw him up close and personal in 2022 when he traveled into Western to take on the Western Mustangs and then to ultimately win that. And now everybody's saying, of course, well, you had Kevin Victome. No, excuse me, not Kevin Victome.
Kevin Mittal.
Mittal, excuse me. You have Kevin Mittal, and you can just throw up a ball to him. He was the Heck Crichton nominee and all, sure, all this stuff. But he's playing outstanding football, and he's doing it right now. Not to say that he doesn't have outstanding performers once again, or outstanding receivers to throw to, but what he's doing has been nothing short of amazing. In this game, 18 for 23, 327 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. His favorite target so far, Olivier Cool, 7 catches, 175 yards, and both of those touchdowns. Playing some outstanding football, most definitely, and a defense that loves to swarm and loves to really do their thing against the Stingers in this one. 3 total sacks, 6 tackles for loss, and a forced fumble by this Laval defense. I mean, I don't think it was ever really in doubt here, but Laval, once again, flexing why they are always one of the top 2 in that conference.
I don't have anything to add on the game, but since we're talking about Laval, and since we brought up by name one former Heck Crichton winner in Kevin Mittal, allow me to take this opportunity, because I don't know when it's going to come up in our next conversation, just naturally. But his Heck Crichton season had him with 58 receptions, 751 yards, and 12 touchdowns. Now, albeit he led the country with those receptions, and he set a Laval record with those 12 touchdowns. Number 4, give me more. Ethan Jordan has 57 receptions, 1,000 yards, and 10 touchdowns. Just going to leave it at that. McGill, Montreal. Tom, take us to our next one.
Love it. I love it so much. Once again, another game that we were pretty confident on. Montreal taking this one 42-3 over the McGill Redbirds. Jonathan Senecal going to do Jonathan Senecal things. 29 for 36, 311 yards, 2 touchdowns. He does have 1 interception on the day, but takes off and runs with it again. 55 yards on the ground, which we appreciate you, Mr. Senecal.
Way to go, young man.
1 touchdown with that as well. And he does a great job of spreading the ball out here. But in this game, the real piece to talk about is that Montreal defense. I mean, ELR, the quarterback for the McGill Redbirds, who has a very long name that affectionately folks refer to him as ELR, thankfully for me, 17 for 28, 184 yards, and 3 interceptions. He also is their leading rusher with 84 yards on the ground. But this Montreal defense, I mean, they are legit. We just talked about what happened with Laval. 6 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, 3 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries, 3 interceptions, and 3 pass breakups. That is unbelievable numbers from a team in just last year who had a record-setting defense. So Montreal still outstanding in all the things that they are able to do. The battles between Montreal and Laval have always been defensive battles. That Dunsmore Cup rarely ever gets over combined 40 points because of how strong everything is. And even I had the esteemed pleasure to talk to Coach Marco Idaluca head coach for the Montreal Canadiens back in the East West Bowl, and I asked him about the RSEQ and how, what's the secret between getting out of there and getting onto the national stage. And without a doubt, despite the fact that he is an offensive coordinator and an offensive coach at heart, he says outstanding defense. If you don't play outstanding defense in the RSEQ, you do not get out of the conference.
And as part of that outstanding defense that Montreal trots out, it's so nice to be able to now for folks in the OUA who, rely on this time of the year to be able to see who we might be going up against come the semifinals in the Vanier Cup. You just remember names like Jeremiah Ojo, who's still getting after the quarterback as part of that D line. Obviously, the President's Award winner and Harold Misan patrolling the middle, and a guy that, was new to my eyes when we got to those U Sport playoffs and in watching that game against UBC and really shutting down that offense in Nicolas Roy in the secondary for Montreal. So a lot of names that folks in the OUA from just seeing them beat Western last year and then in that Vanier, a lot of these names back as along with that Heck Crichton Award winner at quarterback. Tom, let's head over the OUA to CanWest where we saw some wild football this weekend.
Yeah, we on the Eastern Canada side of things, including Ontario and going over, we only had one game that was incorrect in our predictions. In Western Canada, we got them both wrong. And I think I'd be shocked if everybody else who were picking these games didn't have at least one of these games wrong, because we saw two upsets in this one. First one being Regina goes into Manitoba, the number 1 seed against the number 4 seed, and they come away with the victory. Final score 28-25, including a last minute game winning touchdown to go 11 plays, 101 yards in 4 minutes, and to win the game off that. Unbelievable game by these Regina Rams. Noah Pelletier is the real deal, in my opinion. 19 for 27, 207 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He really played fantastic. Marshall Erickson, 16 attempts on the ground, 71 yards rushing. This was just a solid performance by this Regina team, most definitely. But Manitoba certainly showcasing some of the things that they were able to get done and the reason why they were number 1, but just needed to finish. And that defense for them has been middle to bottom tier of Canada for, the entirety of the regular season. And I think that really showed up in this one here, unfortunately losing in this game. And certainly when you look at the amount of turnovers,
Yes.
I think that's a huge aspect into this. I mean, Manitoba has 4 fumbles. 3 of them get recovered by Regina, and just at key moments here. Obviously, we talked about how important this game was going to be for Coach Brian Dolby in his last season with the Manitoba Bisons. And unfortunately, it doesn't end where they want to be, and it's certainly an upset at home. But Coach Dolby, and being the outstanding human being that he truly is, his final words were, we may not have gotten the job done here, but we went out with a bang, and the boys played as hard as they possibly could. And selfishly, as a coach, that's all I really want to see. So a class act for 29 years at the University of Manitoba. He will be missed across U Sports, most definitely.
The boys and the girl, because shout out again to Maya Turner doing her thing with that team. And the turnovers, you had to add in an interception that Regina was able to get on that. Again, that strong offense. Final game of our outside of the U Sports C2C, Tom, a matchup that was part of just a domination as far as Saskatchewan football over BC football when you add in the CFL quarterfinal game with what the Rough Riders did in taking out the Lions. But we had a matchup at the U Sport level. What happened in this one, Tom?
We saw domination and Saskatchewan getting a little bit back to form with how we've seen them in the national stage back in 2021 and 2022. Saskatchewan taking out the UBC Thunderbirds with a score of 38-33. In this game, the way that it ended was something you had to have seen. So to start things off, Saskatchewan gets the ball with a minute left in the 4th quarter. At this point, it's 33-24 in favor of UBC. They drive. They go 67 yards in 22 seconds, capped off with a 33-yard touchdown pass from Anton Amnaru to RSEQ Avul, and it's now 33-31. Saskatchewan goes for the onside kick and recovers it. 4 plays in 25 seconds, and Riker Frank finds the end zone. I know that we did our OUA Players of the Week just in the OUA. If we were going out past this,
Riker
it would be
Frank.
hard to overlook Riker Frank. 26 attempts on the ground, 192 yards rushing, and 2 touchdowns, including the game-winning one for the Saskatchewan Huskies. Unbelievable job by this squad here.
Yeah, these offenses were so explosive. And again, because as you mentioned, with the Saskatchewan team and the UBC team that we've been seeing on the national stage, seeing the performances of guys like Rhett Varva, Daniel Weeb on the Saskatchewan side of things, what Sam Davenport was doing for UBC hooking up or being the target that Garrett Rooker was hooking up with. But as we talked about, and obviously for me, less more so than you, don't follow week by week what's going on in CanWest. No Isaiah Knight participating in this one for UBC, and the rushing attack just didn't seem to be able to pick it up without him in there. But yeah, just such explosive offenses. What a great game to be able to have here. Tom, any last words on our C2C for the week?
Well, I mean, we talked about outstanding work by Rhett Varva, or sorry, by Riker Frank, and you mentioned Rhett Varva. I got to read his numbers out. 13 catches, 187 yards in the air, and a touchdown. Like, unbelievable work by this young man and what he does. This has been outstanding to watch and to really see. To see Saskatchewan get back into at least the Hardy Cup. We'll see what happens in the Battle of Saskatchewan between the Regina Rams and the Saskatchewan Huskies. It'll be an outstanding thing to really be able to see, and should be some great football. But my goodness, talk about upsets.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Again, this is when we get down to this time of the season. It's just such beautiful football week in, week out. So I love that. That's your C2C. We now have our conference championship matchups. But let's take our way back to the OUA to find out how we got there to get the rematch between Laurier and Western. We will go back to the Forest City for a matchup that we had just been champing at the bit for over 2 years now. My Guelph Griffins, your Guelph Griffins, everybody's Guelph Griffins rolling into London, Ontario, and falling short to the Western Mustangs. Final score, Western 30, Guelph 19. And you said this when we were just talking beforehand, because though we were keeping score and tuning in as best we could from the Laurier game, we both obviously watched this one in full going home. You made this comment, and I'm sure you'll say it again in some form or fashion, but let me start by just saying again to our OUA schedule makers, though I imagine there is a bit of a formulaic nature to the way the schedule gets made based on how teams performed, strength of schedule type pieces, and Guelph has not had a ton of success this decade. We get great matchups when we see these two teams duke it out. Obviously, as we talked about with the Laurier, with Laurier beating Western this year, the last time we saw that in the regular season was Guelph in 2021. And even that playoff game that year was a frisky game by the Guelph Griffins, and no less so than on this day as well. Tom, we talked about with this matchup, and there was a technical difficulty on our social media. We're hoping to still get our picks up. If you didn't catch the preview show, though it broke my heart, I went with the Western Mustangs on this one. And in large part, though it's kind of in that realm of not X's and O's per se, not really even the Jimmies and Joes, the coaching standpoint, just the fact of this Guelph team with so many returning players, with new leadership in terms of the head coach, offensive coordinating, defensive coordinating, all these things that we'd seen such great things from this team this year. You're rolling into Western. I think they'll give them a good game. If you're asking me who I think is going to win it, I'm going to take London at home. But Guelph, I think, is in that position, much like we've seen Laurier and the progression they've taken to now be in the spot where they're hosting a Yates Cup, where it's like, this is that, I shouldn't say necessary loss, because so many bounces happening here or there in this game, and Guelph could have taken this one. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But let me just start off by saying, for Guelph fans alike and for everyone even who hates Guelph, be very, very afraid now for this Guelph team going into next year, having had this experience on top of everything else we saw. Tom, that's my first notes off the jump. What was your read following along from University Stadium and then going back to watch it afterwards?
Well, exactly like you said, and I'm so happy that you led off with that. I'm in lockstep with you in this, in that the OUA is probably using some kind of a formula in order to help them with some of the football scheduling, and not actively saying, yeah, we don't want to see these teams play or anything along those lines. But my goodness, whatever you have to do, OUA schedulers, please let's see some more Western Guelph because when these teams are playing at the highest of levels, this is must watch football, regardless if it's in the playoffs or if it's week one of the season. These are two teams that have some bad blood to them, what's for sure, but also very interesting. We talked about it previously as well. This is the first time since I think the 11 teams since we started doing every team doesn't play against two teams in the schedule where Guelph and just one team has played every other team that you could because in the regular season they didn't play Ottawa and they didn't play Western and in the
Oh,
playoffs they played the two of them. So they
how about
played
that?
every single team that was available
Great job
in
by
the
you.
way, which is something pretty interesting at the bare minimum. But absolutely, like you were saying, this was a great showcase by both of these squads here. And the one aspect of this, sorry, let me preface it by this saying this. I knew it was going to be a good game. I knew it was going to be a close one. What I did not foresee is the domination that we saw from the Guelph Griffin rush defense. The
Yeah.
last time that Western didn't get 100 yards collectively rushing in a game, I think we had to go back to 2022 against that Windsor squad with some of their best defense
Yeah.
near the end of the regular season, if my memory serves. But man, Josh Campbell and Curtis Woodmansey were doing outstanding things in the middle of that team, oftentimes meeting running backs directly in the hole. I believe it was in either the third or fourth quarter, but Western is in the red zone. They go to run the ball, and Josh Campbell completely swims Alex Berwick and is waiting in the hole for Yazbak and grabs him and tackles him for a gain of no yards. And it was just outstanding to see how many guys were at the point of attack here. Now, obviously, we still saw Western really do their thing. I mean, Evan Hillock, once again, Evan Hillock type numbers 20 for 28, 314 yards, two touchdowns. He does have the one pick by our guy Kyle Simon Guerin, but this was a fantastic showcase from a Guelph defense. Once again, that if this Guelph team played against Western last year in this same kind of setup, I truly think that Western could have gone for 50 or 60 points against them. But the fact that Coach Matt Barry and Coach Mark Soria have done such an outstanding job completely revamping and reformatting what this team is, I think that Guelph defense played outstanding from start to finish.
Yeah, they really did. I love that you highlighted what Joshua Campbell was doing on the front line. Curtis Woodmansey, no slouch as well up there with them. And I think we have to stick with the line just in the comparative nature of this game. Or first, allow me, just because you're talking about what Evan Hillock did, Tristan Aboud, of course, 24 for 38, 304, one touchdown. Like these teams were so lockstep in the performances on offense and how, again, they were limiting each other on defense. But to that point, can't shout out what the Griffins were doing in the trenches on the defensive side without going right to what Western was doing, because it's this weird trend we've been seeing now. And Western as a whole, that front four, front three at times with the 30 fronts that they've been doing this year, but playing a lot more, at least splashier than we've seen in the past, where obviously you add in, just what these linebackers do in the box play. That's been great for Western, no doubt. But we've just been clamoring for saying, like, who's going to be that next great pass rusher, that guy that's just making quarterbacks sweat rep after rep. And there was a play at some point I don't remember when it was, where Western was in a 30 front, dropped everybody. And I think it was Connor Franzisi just dips the shoulder, rips right away our guy in Baracus at left tackle. And, it was textbook, but it's like, you lose a 5-on-3 matchup. You can't have that. But more than that is what we've seen in this playoffs. Talk about playoff Garrity, Mr. Knocktober. Soren Hallschmidt through 2 playoff games against McMaster and now Guelph, a Guelph team that we've been talking about, and I think still feel confident has one of the best offensive lines. And they were using some tight end sets, some double tight end sets at times. Soren Hallschmidt has racked up 5 sacks in the playoffs thus far. 1.5 coming in this game. You've talked about what our guy Max Van Muhldorfer can do in the middle. They were rotating in Malcolm Frazier on that D-line as well. And then when they send Max Nixon, when they send our guy in Jackson Finley, whether it was an intentional called blitz or starting to see some of those looks where we'd see them rotate him in, add in another safety to look deep, and maybe it's just a part of their rules where, if they're rotating one way to the away from you, then you can just fire. This defense for Western was playing all over the place, and we obviously like to keep things positive especially when it comes to the players, not trying to like, berate any player because we just, we don't have the league without the players. Shout out to them week in, week out. And sometimes we're critical to the league, but I'm going to take a shot at being critical to the turf there in Western. And it's one thing, and this has been a thing since that new field got put in 3 years ago. And actually, when I was coaching with the junior Mustangs, we were actually one of the first teams to be able to practice on that because it was finally done in the summer and we were practicing there. And you saw it then where kids would be slipping left, right, and center, just working basic footsteps, like your kick step and post steps and on a pass rush. And it's one thing for if it were just Guelph coming into London, a university in Guelph that has like the preeminent turf grass management, and for them to be able to say, "Oh, we're so used to literally the best turf in the world, and now we're slipping up," so you could have it as that home field advantage. And Western practices on that field. But the Vashon Genesis touchdown is one in which Jackson Finley's coming like a bat out of hell and has Tristan Abboud dead to rights. Now, I give Tristan all the credit in the world. He steps up nicely, but Jackson Finley looks like a baby deer trying to get its footing, just loses his foot. Abboud steps up, finds Genesis across the middle, touchdown. And on one of the great plays we saw by Max Nixon in chasing down whoever it was, he again has, whether it was the ball carrier, the running back, or perhaps it was Abboud dead to rights, he loses his footing. What made the play so spectacular is 31 gets back on his feet and chasing him down. My goodness. Again, it's one thing if it were a clear home field advantage and it's Guelph slipping up and it's like, hey, look, that's what you got to deal with when you come to Western. The same way that for years, Guelph and Queens had the real grass. And if you weren't used to that, that's an advantage. But the fact we're seeing Western guys slip up on that field too, it's frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, when you start looking at all the leagues or all the teams in the league here, certainly you have to start with Guelph. But I think it's probably the exact same with Laurier because Laurier's turf is unbelievable as well. You and I have had a chance to be there. And when we were there this past weekend for the second half, we were on the sidelines. And shout out to our guy, Aaron Redlund, once again for helping us out and just being a fan of the show and a great human being overall. But when we feel that turf, it is outstanding quality. And I know that Western just recently had their turf redone. And fellas, let's get a little bit more in there. Let's get a little bit more traction in there for the players. And it's like you said, if it's just the visiting team, hey, that's a massive advantage for you, absolutely. But if it's your guys as well, and it's costing you touchdowns as well, I think it's in your best interest to update that turf once again here. But while we are taking a shot at the Western turf, I want to raise up another aspect of Western because you and I were talking about it. That opening graphic or that opening video that Under Armour Canada and the Western Mustangs put together, goosebumps going into that game and watching that when that was going on. Outstanding job by whoever it was that put that together. And just in general, tied into that, Western TV has been doing fantastic work. We talked about the commentators the last time, but in this game, I don't know if it was just for the playoffs or what, but the starting lineups, you get a little like head bust at the bottom of the screen. That's fantastic. Shout out our players. Let the folks at home see them without their helmets on so they can actually recognize them when they're out in public as well. That was a fantastic touch. Shout out to Western TV. Shout out to, I believe it was Under Armour Canada that put that on. But if not, just to Western in general, and to see the graphics and to see everything that's going into this and the shot of the stadium. And the first play is that Jackson Finley perfect textbook tackle, a special teams tackle, the first game of the season against Ottawa. That was awesome.
They seem to like pulling highlights from their games against Ottawa. I'm like, hey, look, fellas, like, I don't know if there's a specific beef going on there. I mean, they had a great game in that one, but like, y'all have highlights every time you step on the field. What did the poor Gigi's do to deserve that? I mean, hey, why aren't you making all your highlights against like a team that you have a more obvious rivalry? Why aren't they against Queens? Why wasn't the, Evan Hillock to, Magne Jones touchdown to win the game with a commentator screaming from the high heavens? Like, come on. There's still my Gigi's a little bit. Come on, that hurt a bit. But no, hey, awesome job. We obviously loved shouting out with the Windsor social media, TV, whomever it was, crew did with the blue collar gold swagger video for Windsor Athletics. Absolutely. And and just to pick it back up, and I'll give it to you on this, Tom, where you talk about the start of the game. This was a start of the game where, for Guelph fans across the board, you're saying, oh, you haven't faced Western yet this year. It's a tough task. You're in London, and it couldn't have started any better for Western, where they start off with the drive where pretty much like before you can say go Stangs, Keon Edwards is punching in a touchdown, followed up by a 2-and-out on the Guelph side of things. And this is where I think the maturity we've seen from a Guelph team and that leadership piece really plays into such a factor. And if we had any questions, and obviously we love what Dexter Janke did with York and will continue to do, but I think in the nature of that debate, and it's not entirely fair to include playoffs because, well, I mean, Coach of the Year should probably make playoffs. And that might have been the difference between it being who we think will get it in Coach Saria and Dexter Janke if York made the playoffs. But put that aside, like the fact that they were able to take that punch from Western on the first drive and then get punched in the mouth themselves and having to go 2-and-out. But then from there, they're able to have a great defensive series, forcing the safety to get themselves on the board and then being able to, like, it was what we saw them do against Laurier going back almost 2 months ago, whenever that was, where when you have a team who's going to throw haymakers, whether it's Laurier, whether it's Western, and just being able to respond, even if it wasn't immediately on that drive, there was no discouragement. There was no, oh, well, you know what? As much as we prepped and we saw where our edges were going to come and where we could have the advantages and whatever it was, there was no it was just like, all right, let's go. We know what we can do. And they step back up, and it just, again, a fantastic job going into the house of the champs and not blinking for a second. They sat there at the table with them, sat there, stared into their eyes and said, we're here till the bitter end. I love that as far as the start, but what a tough time it was as a Guelph fan, watch that being like, oh, yeah, I guess this is what's going to happen in this one.
Yeah, and I love the fact that while we were at Laurier, we were getting score updates over the loudspeakers, and every time a score update would happen, it was like my favorite one. At one point, it was
12-5, I think.
no, it was Western 17, Guelph 16. The entire ooh. Ooh, everybody, I think everybody across the league was cheering for Guelph in that game, but Western obviously coming away with this one. I mean, when you look at things, we already talked about how great that Guelph defense was against the run. Keanu Yazbek, 14 attempts for only 60 yards. You could see there was some real frustration on his face at certain times, slamming the ball on the ground because he wasn't able to get a lot of things going here. And you go into the receiving side of things. Mohsen Jamal, outstanding. 5 catches for 103 yards. Sonny McIntosh is really going to be a problem for a lot of teams here. And it's like, oh, great. Here's another one that Western has. Seth Robinson only has 2 catches, but one of them for a touchdown. The guy that I want to highlight and has been playing outstanding football for a little while now, for a lot of this season, is Mr. Braden Masseri. How well he has been playing, having that outstanding catch in triple coverage against, I believe it was Windsor a couple of weeks ago. And then in this one, his 36 yard long, the game sealing touchdown where he breaks 4 tackles on the sideline and goes in, punches it in for the Western Mustangs. He's been nothing short of amazing with the capabilities that he has, the reach that he's got. He's deceptively good. He's got really good hands as well. And he's a strong dude. I love everything that we're seeing from this kid.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. And yeah, there's the touchdown, which was like both frustrating, but he runs so bloody hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, it's one, like, obviously you got to make that, you got to have someone make that tackle there. But I think it was on the opening drive for for Western, leading to the Edwards touchdown, where he gets a ball across the middle and he's coming with a head of steam. And I wouldn't want to have to step in front of that guy. And what's so great about having him being that physical, and it's part and parcel, if you're going to be in the slot for Western, you have to be like that because they're going to have him bomber in on their run game as well. Even some plays where he's coming across the formation like it's a jet sweep, but now he's actually leading up the middle as a lead blocker on like a power look. Like, and for both these offenses, because there was some fun stuff that Guelph was doing with their run game, using their slots in a few ways into their run game, where uh, getting to watch it on the replay is honestly so fun because I'm just constantly, oh, back, back, back. Okay, so hold on. In this one, they showed the jet motion. Oh, now he's doing, and so having Maseri with that physical nature and just wanting to just put his shoulder down into guys, whether he has the ball or whether he's lead blocking, is outstanding. Yes, great job by you highlighting him, talking about what Dasani McIntosh has been doing since he really came on the scene strong and seemingly by function that Seth Robertson was a little injured this year, that we see McIntosh go get into the swing of things. And Seth comes back in this game, 2 receptions, one being for a touchdown. So it looked like at times they were still using him sparingly, but able to still use him to his strength. But most in Jamal, where they're, when they'll go trips to the field, they'll leave him on an island and just a number of times where whatever it is they're reading with the coverage based on what the look they have to the field and maybe a play action fake where it's just him saying, okay, hey, I don't know if it's him, adjusting his gloves a certain way to be able to say, hey, Evan, I'm going deep. I'm taking this guy, to the crib. And Evan just puts that ball up, gives him a chance, and he comes down with it. He finishes 5 receptions for 103 yards. And just so many of those were just those shots where he has that connection with his guy in Hillock. So it was spectacular to watch in terms of that standpoint. Guelph, let's talk about offensively, because we went into this one finding out somewhat late in the mix that Donovan Malloy was going to be out. And at the end of the day, we talk about what Western did, probably what Guelph's defense did, slowing down that Western rushing attack. I mean, obviously, you look at the numbers, Guelph only rushes for 80 yards, a difference of 17. But again, like shout out to Western for doing their thing. Certainly would have made a difference having Donovan Malloy in there. A couple nice runs by Isaiah Smith. Good to see him get his thing going. Obviously, Tristan Boot, Caleb Sargent starting. I talk about our guy in Kojo Adua in Laurier being like bit of a troublemaker. Caleb, I'm starting to think when he's on special teams, he's that guy on the sideline who's like, Caleb, I like your game, man, but bit of a troublemaker at times. Let's see in the mix there. Really couldn't, the rushing attack wasn't going all that effectively in the traditional sense. But what I loved was, and I'm not sure who was necessarily getting them, but times where they'd have like their 2-hole receiver to the boundary, motioning across, and then handing off, where they'd have Isaiah Smith as in a single backfield formation, him lead blocking downhill to now, whether it was Genesis, it might have been Arsenault at a time, getting what would be traditionally an outside attacking sweep play, put his foot in the ground and, all right, hey, follow Big 26 in the hole there. The rest of the O-line running like a traditional power scheme. So again, getting creative in the way of saying we're down one of our running games. We can't abandon the run. So the rushing attack was actually perhaps a little better for Guelph than it shows in the stats, because a lot of what probably got listed as passes, because I think it was Aboud kind of flipping it forward to whether it was Genesis and at times maybe Arsenault, were pretty much run plays. So again, I love the creativity and recognizing we're down one of our guys, one of our best options in the running game. We can't abandon the run. How can we get creative without him?
Yeah, seeing Kane Stevenson get back involved in some of those games, in some of those rushes, quote unquote rushes, and seeing what they're able to do with Vashon Genesis, that's really the mad scientist feel that Coach Soria brings to any offense that he's a part of, especially when you've got the athletes like Guelph does, and you're still able to, quote unquote, rush the ball, even if it's classified as a pass, and still be very effective while doing it, but just getting the ball to your playmakers in different ways rather than just a standard like I formation, here's the ball, here you go. Having guys come in with motion, having guys come in and just doing it like a jet toss that's technically a pass, but is actually just a run in that sense, is really where he gets a chance to showcase what he's able to do here. And once again, Vashon Genesis, when he gets the ball in his hands, special things happen. His touchdown grab is no short of that. When you see that touchdown, oh yeah, he must have been open in the end zone. No, he took a crossing route and then ran at 23 yards, including trying to run somebody over and getting into the end zone. So he was doing some great stuff. Tristan Aboud, once again, we talk about him as a mobile quarterback, as he's able to run and take off, which he absolutely can. But in my opinion, what's more impressive about him is his pocket presence and how well he moves in the pocket. You mentioned it previously. Jackson Finley's coming up and he's got him dead to rights. And sure, Jackson does slip, but it's because Tristan Aboud is able to step up in the pocket so easily and just have that presence of mind to know that. And once again, yes, he is a quarterback that can take off and run with it. And yes, he is good at doing that. But until he crosses that line of scrimmage, those eyes are downfield no matter what. And he's looking for guys. He's looking to make plays. And that's where a number of these came from, most definitely. Once again, this is one of those where to see a lot of the matchups that we would really love to see, you really should be live and in person for this so that you get a chance to. But Willem Arsenal against Richard Adubafor, that was an outstanding matchup for sure. I think Arsenal got him a couple of times with just quick outs and that notion because you ain't out jumping Adubafor, that's for damn sure. But there was a couple of times here. I think it was on the first drive as well to really highlight that Tristan Aboud has the ball, and you can tell it's supposed to be just quick options, whether slant routes or out routes or whatever else. And he's there, he's got good protection. No one is open, not even close to being open. So he takes off and run. He gets a decent gain of 4 or 5 yards or whatever, but that's a lot of the story in this one. I mean, Vashon, 7 catches for 93 yards and a touchdown, which is great. Everybody else, Jackson Zerby, 2 catches, albeit 72 yards, but only 2 catches. Jacob Thomas, 2 catches. Jared Tessier, 2 catches. Willem Arsenault, 3 catches. So you have to spread the ball out here because if you start trying to focus on one dude, who do you want to go after? Kojo Odub? You want to go after Jacob Saunders, Richard Adubafor, Jackson Finley? I mean, it's not exactly like there's somebody you can pick on with this Western defensive secondary.
Which I think is why they were using so many sets. Guelph, that is, where there'd be the first play on the drive, and they're doing that, slot, jet, pass, toss, run, whatever. And then the next one, it's the same look. It's the play action off of that, or it's an inside zone look with a seam and a slant combo where they're reading if that will linebacker steps up in the run, and then all of a sudden Aboud's just hitting his guy with a step on the corner and all these types of things where you're just having to put defenders in conflict. Because if you play them in a straightforward match, there was one play where Guelph goes into it was like a double tight look. They're keeping max protection in, and I don't know what the combos were downfield, and it was just nothing, because it's like, okay, Kojo can cover a guy running and in. Okay, a dude before is making his read on that. It was like whatever it was. It's just if you're just gonna play him straight up, you're not gonna get your opportunities.
My favorite example of that, just remember it coming to me. Guelph tries to run a trick option where it's here's a handoff here, and then a back handoff, and then another final backward lateral to Tristan Aboud, and you're like, oh, they're going for a trick play, and it's blocked up beautifully, but Aboud, you could tell. That's not there. That's not there. That's not there. Go back to it again. No, that's not there. Okay, I got to take off and run with it. Whenever you have a trick play like that, it's typically, I've got somebody who's got a step because the defender wasn't, doing the proper thing. Nope. These Western defensive secondary guys, they are very well coached, well trained. They know their responsibilities, and regardless of whatever's happening in the backfield, they know that they've got their guy and they lock them up really well. That was one of my favorite examples of that.
Most certainly. And it's in those situations where then sometimes, as you highlighted, Aboud's having to then take off and run. And, he gets 33 yards. Obviously, it's a nice amount for him to be able to pick up in those situations. And part of, again, what's so nice about seeing a matchup with Guelph and Western is being able to compare Tristan to what Evan did. And Evan, just such an Evan-y type day, 20 for 28, 314, 2 touchdowns. The one interception, which was so un-Evan Hillocky like that I'm giving him all the benefit of the doubt, because there's whatever it was, I think some kind of a play action that he throws in, whatever the combo was, and Kyle Simon Guerin was literally just sitting there for the interception. You never see him make those mistakes, so I'm not even going to hold it against him. And as well, just to further that connection, where Evan, though he has the great pocket presence to be able to step up, and so you can talk about him as mobile in that sense. When he needs to escape, he does a great job. Only 12 yards, only has to do it 2 times. And frankly, honestly, to beyond just making the comparison with him and Aboud, which for Guelph fans, let's go. Come on. This was almost our guy, Evan Hillock. And now we might have a guy who can do some of those similar things, Hillock-esque, at least in his second year starting for Aboud. But on one of those plays, and this was something that was really brought to our attention following the Guelph-Ottawa game, when we saw the father of our guy, Anthony Moore, Tuzo, and highlighting how excited that Tuzo was for this matchup, because him and Hillock go back to those days of, correct me if I'm wrong, of Newman versus STA. Do I have that right for Tuzo?
STM versus Newman, yes.
STM versus Newman, yes. And a few times where it was our guy and Tuzo getting Hillock, or at least chasing him down. You could tell there was an extra little pat on the back, or a little bit of that rivalry, which again just makes these connections as they go for these kids know each other from high school all the way up to, in some cases, the pros, just so much fun for us to cover. Tom, I don't have anything else to say on this one other than, again, I might go back and watch it just for the fun of it. Great matchup. We talked about what Brian Garrity did in this one already. Perfect on the day for 3 for 3 in both field goals and extra points. Shout out to Benjamin Lane, 3 for 4 and an extra point to boot, getting 10 points there. And, not in great weather conditions either. Lane adds in the Rouge. Anything else for you on this one?
The last thing that I saw, and once again, it was a great showcase by this Guelph Griffin defense for the most part. I believe it was I think it was midway point between the first quarter. Uh, it was 7-2 at this point. Western starting to put together something of a drive. I think it was Nathaniel Slaughter comes down and the ball goes through his hands to get to Mohsen Jamal on a simple pass play. And you think, oh, he was close, whatever. I rewatched that 3 times. If he catches that, that's a touchdown.
Mm.
And now suddenly it's early in the first quarter. You've got an extra touchdown here. You've got an offense that is going to continue and do some of the things. I don't know. I don't know. There's woulda, coulda, shoulda in that kind of scenario for sure. I don't want to get into that too much, but Guelph, shout out to Guelph because they were in this game from start to finish, most definitely. It's going to be a question that we bring up on their exit meeting and when we talk about these Guelph Griffins, but something that I want to leave you with here is certainly last year in the first year for both Tristan Aboud and Marshall McRae, we saw that two-headed monster really do its thing and have the capabilities that it had. This year, most definitely more in favor of Mr. Aboud than Mr. McRae. Not that Marshall McRae wasn't a part of the offense, but it was very much, okay, when we get in the red zone, when we need a type play, sure, we'll put in Marshall here. In this one, he goes 1 for 2 in passing attempts for 14 yards, and he only has 3 attempts on the ground. He only really touches the ball 5 times in this game. What does that mean for Marshall McRae in this offense in the future? Is there going to be more of a commitment to get him more involved, or are they just going to say, you know what, Tristan Aboud has been improving day after day after day after day. His passing attack is outstanding, and he is able to run the ball as well. What does this look like? That's the question that I want to leave with Guelph fans.
I think that's a great perspective to look at it. And frankly, though Aboud had a hell of a year, and I think he's earned the right to be, if it's 1A, 1B, or clearly it's just like the McRae package that comes in, it's Aboud's position at that QB spot. I would have liked to see them use McRae as a passer a little bit more, if for no other reason, and maybe that's the change they're going to see going to next year, is that I think it just became a little bit not predictable because the nature of the triple options you run with him is that they are unpredictable. But at the very least, where when he's in there, okay, they have these variations of triple options. Now I think we got to add in that look where all of a sudden you have that full house backfield and no, we're just going straight pass from it and just giving that look. Again, I will leave that for the exit meeting to come to the Guelph Griffins. Hey, hell of a year. We say salute to you. Shout out to all the amazing things you did and to Coach Sria, our pick for Coach of the Year. We'll talk about in more detail in the exit meeting. To the Western Mustangs, we say we'll see you in Kitchener-Waterloo, where we're heading right now to break down the other game where when you brought up that near pick by Slaughter as a major possible turning point, this was a game no different in terms of key moments that could have been major turning points, because a game where we have a final score in the Laurier Golden Hawks 29, the Queens Golden Gales 21, and a game in which you have Queens up in the early throws of this one, a slow start, some unfortunate injuries on the Queens side of things, which I think might have included a broken ankle, a broken leg, something like that. Pretty awful, hoping all the best for that young man, and then possibly concussion on a drive not too far from there. But a slow start, both in terms of just the pacing of the game because of injuries, but also these defenses came to play. And I'll just jump to it quickly before I just get your general thoughts or on whatever you want to start with. If not for, what was it, like a 6-minute period toward the end of the first half, late in the second quarter, where Laurier goes on a run where they score, what was it, seemingly, was it 12 unanswered points or something like that, or 9 unanswered points? This is a game that's really nip and tuck in the opening throws of this matchup.
Most definitely. When you look at everything here and when you look at this, so to start things off, well, I guess we should really start all of this off. In the very beginning of the first quarter here, Taylor Elgers might get some pressure in his face, and he tries to throw the ball as a last-ditch effort. He fumbles it. Laurier's defense comes up with a fantastic 2-and-out to force the field goal into this one. But at a certain point, it's 12-3 early into the second quarter. And hilariously, I turn to you at a certain point and I say, this is the second time that Laurier has gotten the ball and they haven't really done anything offensively as of yet in this game. At what point in time are you hitting the panic button, Zach? Are you doing this? And you said, well, this Laurier offense is so good, they can really score at any time. And what do? Oh, yeah, 16 points in 4 minutes.
16.
And I go, huh. Yeah, okay. Mr. Bader Shamai knows his football. Okay, yep, fair enough.
Crazy take, man. Laurier's good on offense. So yeah. Really looked at my crystal ball on that one.
But an outstanding job, most definitely. And I think it's actually more than that because we get a touchdown from Ethan Jordan, that's 7 points. We get a safety, that's 9 points. We get another touchdown from Ryan Hughes, that's 16 points. And then another touchdown from Laomi Ojutalayo in the dying seconds of that second half. So that's 23 points unanswered in the last, 4 minutes of play. That is what took the top off here. And this Queens defense is legit. We've been saying that all year long with what they have up front, the linebacking core and their defensive secondary. They are fantastic. We got a chance to speak to our guy in Ashton Miller-Melanson once again after the game. What an outstanding human being. He's fantastic at what he does. And he had Ethan Jordan a bunch of times here. Now, Ethan Jordan still goes off and does his thing. 8 catches, 89 yards and a touchdown, sure. But there was a lot of lockdown pressure on these guys, and nothing came easy by any means here. Shout out to our guy Laomi Ojutalayo. He gets 4 catches, 80 yards, and a touchdown, including a couple of jet sweeps as well. He's doing some fantastic work. But yeah, what a defensive showcase. Despite the fact that it was 29-21, this was a defensive game. Really was.
Totally. So you mentioned the Laomi touchdown, and I think it came off a play action, but he's crossing the field, gets it. Maybe the catch is made at 7 yards, and then he just with a full head of steam just continues on his pathway. A fun Twitter poll or Instagram poll would be like, who do you at least want to have to get in front of as far as receivers? We've mentioned some of the best already in Braden Seri, in Vashon Genesis. You got to put Laomi's name up there as far as receivers, true receivers. So you're like, I don't want to tackle that guy with a full head of steam. And Laomi also demonstrated why, he'll try and go over you as well. Though the attempted hurdle was, Laomi just likes to have fun out there. That man was
standing straight up and down, and Laomi said, yeah, I'm going to hurdle this dude.
Shout out to you, number 11. But I think part of the reason why, what drove you asking that question early on about, like, do you have to hit the panic button if you're the Laurier faithful? Because in this one, it's a tight game. It's a defensive matchup as you're highlighting throughout the game entirely. But it's early in the second quarter, or let me see if I have my time right. I think we're in the second quarter where Anthony Leo leads Queens on a drive starting in their half of the field on their 35, where he's completing it to Logan Walton. He's getting they get a penalty for a first down, I believe. They get a major pickup for Walton. He's hitting Falcone, he's hitting Quemo, and then he's getting Quemo in the end zone for a touchdown. And then it's the following drive where Elgersma's leading his guys down the field, but then it's a missed field goal from Dawson Hodge, and just had all the works of like, is this the game from hell for Laurier, where it's like you're driving, you're moving the ball, and now it's a ball that, again, I don't know if if the laces were weird, if it went off the side of his foot, but it's like Dawson Hodge missing from 24. Like, that's the type of thing where it's like, oh God, the Queens Golden Gales fans did some kind of like weird, like sacrificial ceremony to pray to the football gods to make everything and anything go their way on this one. And then, of course, as you highlight, Elgersma finds Ethan Jordan. It's then the safety. It's then just the Ryan Hughes touchdown, and it starts to snowball. But shouting out to this Queens team, and I think one of the big misnomers for us is just why Jared Kasari only got the ball 6 times. And as far as we know, other than the fact that we know he's been injured all year, I don't think we've figured out the why of it all. But this is a game where it's down into the fourth quarter, and there are key leverage moments where I'm just whispering to you. I'm like, I kind of want to see Queens get the stop here, because there was a big chunk of that fourth quarter where it's a single score lead. It finished as a single score lead, and Queens was able to move the ball at times. Their defense was playing so strong. It's this aspect, just like we looked at the Guelph game, with obviously no missing some of their running backs altogether. But with Jared Gasar, you think whether it's a factor of him being beat up, whether it's a factor of, obviously Queens their starting quarterback, because we anticipate is Alex Vreekin. Some of the other receivers that they're banged up with, it's just man, oh man, like shout out to this team for despite what some folks think the adversity that Queens doesn't deal with. Um, Man, they had some hills to climb in this year, just dealing with all those injuries. But the Jared Kasari piece, I'm not questioning my guy Nez. There's clearly something we don't understand here. I don't know what was going on with that.
So I completely agree with you. I do not understand why he wasn't more involved. He had to have some kind of a lingering injury or something along those lines. Although he only has 6 attempts for 48 yards. When you and I were on the sidelines and getting, somewhat close to the game, and we see him running and he's only like 30 yards in front of us, and we're watching him and how hard he's running, it doesn't seem like he has an injury to our standpoint by any means. And that's probably just more of a shout out to Kasari and his toughness to work through that. But certainly surprising calls that we saw, 2 drives in a row in the third quarter where Queens goes for it on 3rd and short, like 3rd and 2 yards, and they throw both times and incomplete both times to give the ball back to Laurier. Now, once again, the Queens defense does an outstanding job. Nothing comes from both of those turnovers, but you and I are both looking at each other like, you do have Jared Kasari back there, right? We're not just, we're not crazy. It's not somebody else wearing number 29 for the Queens Gales. So and certainly there's a lot of merit in, while you're catching them offside, everybody and their mother is thinking, okay, well, Jared Kasari is going to get the ball in this one. It's 3rd and short. So to try to get them offside or try to catch them unawares. But man, that just seemed a little questionable in my sense. And once again, I'm not questioning Coach Nez. He's done an outstanding job, but just surprising, I should say, more than anything. But what I do want to say is the receivers for Queens had an outstanding game. Shout out to Matt Camillo in particular. 7 catches for 100 yards. Nico Cuomo, 8 catches for 69 yards and the touchdown. I really liked a lot of the aspects that I saw from Anthony Leo. 26 for 43, 293 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. I liked the fact of how twitchy he is, where if he does have some room to run, he will take off with it. He only gets about 8 yards in this one officially, but he has a long of 11, which makes me think that those sack yardages are taking away from his rushing yards or whatever the case. But I liked what I saw from Anthony Leo. I like where this Queens offense seemingly is going. Now, obviously, not potentially, you are going to be losing Jared Kasari as of next year. So what does that do to your run game? We'll have to take another deeper dive, obviously, in our exit meeting with these Queens Golden Gales. But Anthony Leo and the connection that he had with some of those receivers, and a lot of time, once again, you could say, well, a lot of those passes that Anthony Leo was doing were just, tossing it up to his guys. Well, when you've got a guy like Matt Camillo who can outjump a lot of the other DBs in this conference, why not? Why not give your guys a chance? Logan Walton, what he did last week against Windsor, Russell Weir throwing that up to him, Nico Cuomo. There's something to be said about, obviously you don't want to do it every time, but in certain key areas where you're running for your life here and that Laurier defense is coming for your head, you know what? Chuck it up to your guy who's got one-on-one coverage. See if he comes down with it.
Definitely, and again, this is a team where, aside from the fact that there's no Vreekin for them, I think Ashby Jacobs is a guy that they expected to do good things for them in this year. I'm trying to remember another receiver who they're out of. So it's just, again, a testament to the system really being set up for the success in those opportunities when they had them. And yeah, no, Anthony Leo again is just not a player where maybe we'll have some fun with our offseason fake trade situations, because you look at the growth he was able to show when we compare what he was doing last year filling in for Vreekin, where it was really tough sledding, and of course that was him and Russell Weir. They clearly made the choice that Weir was gonna more so pivot to athlete type dude, the same way that like Matt Mahler is kind of that athlete for Ottawa, where he'll return some kicks, get a receiver rep or two, and where it really comes down to it, maybe taking a short yardage. Like Anthony Leo, we'll have to look up a little bit more. And as you said, maybe it's for our conversation in the off season, the exit meeting, a guy where I think has shown some really, really good promise as a guy who, whether he's ready for this situation yet, and maybe if he has some healthier weapons as well, maybe he is the guy who can do it for them. This is a starting OUA quarterback, and I am very confident saying that with what we've been able to see him do. Now, Tom, another great matchup in this game, and we spotted this going into it, was the matchup of, our guy and Charlie Taggart as the special teams coordinator for Queens and the combined efforts of Coach Robichaud and Coach Daly for Laurier. Because as we talked about, this has to be a matchup of as good returners that we've seen all year long. And, we were alluding to the whole notion of it being award season when it comes to all the various positions. The matchup of Ian St. Arnaud and Tayshaun Jackson is perhaps a matchup of the first team OUA All-Stars, or I forget how they do the returners, if it's just one a piece, either as the first team guys or as in some order of operation, the first team and the second team return guys. And what was so great about the matchup that these coaches were clearly dealing with was, both of them were both teams, whether it was Matt Driver or Dawson Hodge, were told don't kick to either 6 in the tricolors or 23 in the purple and the gold. And at a certain point, the minds that be of Robichaud and Daly for Laurier and with Coach Taggart with Queens, we're just like, all right, we're not giving you a choice. We're leaving the one guy back there and we're sitting him to the boundary because obviously, as you know, most teams are going to try and kick to where there's less space so you can really force him to the boundary. So here are your options now. You either kick it to our guy where we're waiting for our return there, or you can kick it to the field where once he does get his hands on it, because Canadian football in the 5-yard halo, you give him all this space. So I loved it. It was kind of like this game of chicken from both sides of like, all right, we're just leaving you with no choice. And a great, again, with how nip and tuck this game was, how close it was. There was a play, it might have been on the missed field goal by Hodge in the second quarter, or it might have just been on a stellar punt by him where St. Arnaud, first of all, great over-the-shoulder catch, trying to retreat to get it, ends up in the end zone and muscles his way out to be able to save himself from giving up those points. But just what is so spectacular, and we were highlighting it in the Guelph and Western game in so many facets, is the chess matches that we see between these coaches, especially a situation with this one where these two teams played nearly a month ago. They have that familiarity. And so I loved it from that standpoint. And I guess just last thing for me, and whether you want to talk about the special teams aspect, just again, to shout out to what Queens did on this day, where same matchups, relative same level of health a month ago, they lose by 30. They come in on this one, and we kind of talked about it where with Windsor doing a similar thing. This really was like so similar to that semifinal matchup from a year ago. Windsor loses by 30 in the regular season. They return to Kitchener-Waterloo, and they're just a beat or a penalty or a this, that, and away from upsetting the Golden Hawks. Queens does the same thing, and not to take away from Laurier because they were spectacular on the day, but more shout out to what Windsor did last year, but with the Queens Golden Gales this year being so banged up, to all the coaching staff who, of course, put the players that they had in a position to have success. And we haven't really talked about that defense for Queens yet by name. Obviously, your guy, Justin Pace, was just all over the place. His tackles are ridiculous. Silas Hubert, Daly Newell, as we've seen all year long, just dominating. And Van Wishart getting to, I think he got to Elgersma once or twice. Just great day on both sides, but just big shout out to Queens for stepping up huge when they were certainly an underdog in this one.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, and I also love that you talked about the special teams because it's definitely something that I wanted to get to as well. And being live in person, once again, you're able to see so much more than just what the camera shows you on OUA TV or just in even on TSN. If you're watching a CFL game, it's the same thing. If you're in person, you can see the DBs a lot better. You can see things a lot better. Anyways, being there and being almost directly in front of both Tayshaun Jackson and Ian St. Arnaud in different times when they have opportunities to return the ball, whether it's on a punt return or a kickoff return, I saw a couple of similarities, but a few key differences between the two of them as well. Both of them outstanding in their own rights. With Tayshaun Jackson, his ability to cut on a dime and to change his momentum is something that makes him so special and so dangerous anytime he touches the ball. And he's able to use anything that you give him and able to knife up the field, find the gap, and really take off and get things going. What I saw from Ian St. Arnaud was him working with his blockers and setting up blocks before cutting it back and using that outstanding speed that he has as well. There was one in particular, it was kicked on our side of the field, away from the scoreboard. We were right in front of it in the third quarter. And he grabs the ball close to our sideline and he's running up directly towards a few of his defenders with Laurier tacklers coming down at him. And he walks towards them, even though you can see there's a gap over here, but he walks toward them for an extra step to really get those Laurier defenders to commit, and then cuts it back, setting up all of his other blockers to go across the field. And if not for one shoelace tackle, he could have been gone. And he's done that effectively now a few times, and that's what leads to his field goal return for touchdowns. You don't go 125 yards or whatever it is consistently without being able to work with your guys who are blocking for you and helping to set up their blocks. The really great returners allow their guys to get into position and then work off of that. And that's exactly what Ian St. Arnaud was doing in this game, which was what makes him so outstanding as a returner and just so spectacular to watch. Now, both of them are effective. Both of them have touchdowns, multiples in the return game. But I think the Ian St. Arnaud version of that, at least from what I saw, was just so impressive with how he's able to do things. And obviously, a lot of that comes down to the coordination and the coaching that our guy and Charlie Taggart has been doing. We've said it so many times, but shout out to you once again, my man. Your influence on that Queens special teams has been nothing short of amazing. To go into the Queens defense in particular and just this defense in general, I mean, there's a reason why Justin Pace has been one of my absolute favorite linebackers to watch this entire season. He finishes this game with 12 and a half tackles and a few really big tackles in key situations. The next closest individual person tackling is Jared Suey with 5. To go from 5 tackles at your second highest to 12 and a half. If that doesn't showcase to you how well this guy is able to get all over the field, I don't know what else will. And my absolute favorite aspect of this man, Justin Pace, is that when you look at him, certainly without pads on, he doesn't look super imposing. He's not this big hulking dude, but he utilizes his body and his body control so effectively. You and I have both seen Tanner Nelms take on some real big dudes, including some defensive linemen, and win and truck guys over. And consistently, when Justin Pace and Tanner Nelms are meeting in the hole, that's it. That's as far as either of them are getting, because Justin Pace has got such great body control to put his entire body weight into that tackle and get things down. So fantastic to see. And like you said, Van Wisher, 2 tackles, 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss, 1 forced fumble, and a fumble recovery. That is the very first play that we were talking about where Taylor Elgersma fumbles the ball and Queens takes over to get the early lead there. So an outstanding job of this Queens defense, playing better and better and better as the year has gone on.
Most certainly. And talking about defenses, obviously we got to talk about what Laurier was doing, and especially to all those things you were talking about with the special teams of what you can really see better in person. You've been mentioning this week after week in terms of the secondary play and how you can really just lock in if you want to say, all right, I'm going to spend this whole drive watching number 28 Malik Cote. And, he comes to ball. It's absolute blanket coverage. Obviously, Jahari Hastings does. And the speed and his ability to fill into the box as well, making tacklers against guys. You talk about Justin Pace not being the biggest, most brilliant guy. And you can say the same with Liam Sutherland in that linebacking core. Great athletes and smart athletes, knowing how to take advantage of leverage and meet guys in the hole. But obviously, Jahari Hastings, he's not an all-star because, he's the biggest, baddest dude. He's fast. He's smart. His coverage is insane, but he still has that just absolute dog mentality to get in the box and make tackles surely. So again, a defense, and with our guy Dollywall Patrol on the back end of it all, that's been so spectacular all year long. Great matchup, honestly, between these two clubs. It's so great seeing these defenses. You talk about what Laurier was doing offensively all year long, and by the yardage, they still end up with 464 yards. But just Queens' job being able to slow down that offense and just the bend but don't break nature, and Laurier defensively, really, with the exception of that one really strong drive for Queens, they give up a play here and there, but they just been so solid all year long. And frankly, whether it was a function of Queens just feeling their best opportunities were in the passing game, and they end up with nearly 300 yards passing, which, again, shout out Anthony Leo, shout out to these receivers that are stepping up in big places, but being able to hold Jared Kasari. And again, maybe in the offseason, when we do the exit meeting with Queens. Maybe we'll get to talk for someone with them and to see what was the mentality in this ball game of wanting to really attack in the air and what Kasari's status was. Whichever way you spin it, being able to hold Queens under 100 yards, being able to limit Kasari one way or the other to the numbers they did was just outstanding. So great job by both these teams. Both these defenses came to play. Just classic late October or early November in this case. OUA, just Canadian football. Tom, final thoughts on this game that we haven't touched on?
Just fantastic. What a fantastic showcase from this game. And a pleasant surprise on how well some of those Queens fans were traveling. There was a few times where, Queens had to get loud and either celebrate or they were trying to disrupt something that Laurier was doing. And you and I are looking around being like, they only have one section, but they were pretty loud in the things that they were doing, which was pretty cool to see that. And shout out to the Queens faithful and what they've been able to do. Man, an outstanding showcase by both of these squads. A Laurier squad that really seems to be in top tier performance with everything that they're able to get done, and certainly going into what's going to be their biggest test of the season. I know they've already played against Western once, but Western in the regular season and Western in the playoffs are two different teams, man. So this is going to be a really exciting one. To Queens, I say adieu. Thank you for everything that you have done. Shout out to Coach Steve Snyder, Nez, Charlie Taggart, Coach McManus, and everybody else on that Queen staff. You've done outstanding work with the tricolor, and good luck to you next season. And we will see you in the exit meeting.
And shout out to that bus driver. We gotta love it when they arrive safely with no collisions on the way. Save the collisions for on the field. Tom, great job by you. What an outstanding weekend of football across the nation, setting up some outstanding matchups we have coming our way for the conference finals across the board, with St. Mary's taking out St. FX to take on Bishops out in the AUS, having the Hardy Cup, or probably the Dunsmore Cup that everyone and their mother expected, Laval, Montreal, and seeing the Battle of Saskatchewan with the Huskies taking on Regina for the Hardy Cup out west. And for your 116th Yates Cup, the rematch from last year. And as great as so many teams played in the OUA this year, it would be wrong to not have the rematch of Laurier Western, but this time it's in Laurier's backyard in the KW. Make sure to get your tickets for that one. I'm certain it's going to sell out quick. You talk about how well Guelph fans traveled. You talk about how well the Queens fans traveled. You can be sure Western is going to be packing that house. It is going to be a purple affair left, right, and center. And with how great those new adjustments are with the stands, the field, everything like that, it's going to be a spectacle. Tom, final thoughts on the whole weekend of U Sports football that we saw?
Man, if you can't appreciate Canadian university football by now, you're just clearly not watching these games. I mean, the OUA games, while sure they came out as we predicted them to be, they were exciting as all hell from start to finish. And if you watch any other games, maybe outside of the RSEQ, but any other games across Canada, you were treated to some outstanding football, and certainly in CanWest, some last second play to get two major upsets here. So make sure you are tuning in at the bare minimum to all of your games across the country. And once again, as these get less and less and less, with more playoffs happening and teams getting eliminated, you're only going to see better and better and better performances in this game. So a fantastic weekend of football across the entire country. And I'm just so thankful I get to cover it all with you, my man.
Right back at you, brother. So I hope you enjoyed your U Sports slate of football this weekend. And again, we will be in Kitchener-Waterloo setting up the 116th Yates Cup with another Game Day Live, so you can catch us right there at the 55.